Hello and good evening, everyone. Happy to have you with me. Hello, Substack. Hello, YouTube. People are just arriving. So we'll go into the topic in a moment. Just to get everything set up for now, because multi-stream, you can watch this stream on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and on Substack at the same time. That is always a little bit of effort. But yeah, so what are we going to talk about today? So first of all, you can, whatever happens in this session, give me some feedback, write comments, let me know what you think. If you have questions, I will go over them. But the main idea, the main topic for today is to actually think about ourselves, our own mind, and how can we maintain something. So this session is meant that you can take away practical methods, or you can actually hear about those if they sound a little bit too complicated or something like that. Or the more easier one is just take those with you and practice them. Practice them in your own life, in your own day, to get something very important done for you, which is to maintain control over your own mind. Because many of us, and this is what the title means of this session, is that many of us suffer twice, or we all basically suffer twice from so many things. And not just twice, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times. And there are some people out there who never stop suffering because of things. So this episode is not meant to replace any form of therapy out there. Don't get me wrong. This is not what I want to try to help everyone, to provide everyone methods and ways in a Stoic sense. So this is all in the Stoic lens and how I practice it for myself. Basically, every of those kind of things, because I have those problems, because I'm a human being, right? And these kind of things are helpful for us to get back in a moment when things happen which will haunt us for days and weeks to come, or create the next sleepless night today, if we have something on mind which bothers us but we cannot get rid of it. That can be a negative emotion. That can be a discussion you had with someone. That can be a deal which you're really looking forward to, but you're looking forward for some kind of deal or a new job or an interview, and you wait for the response, and you think it's yesterday, and your mind is running, right? You have these ideas of what maybe I could do something, maybe I can change something, while your conscious mind knows that you can't really do something right now, because, well, you have done whatever you can. Now it's about to wait. But your ego, your emotional part of you, just keeps pushing. It keeps pushing and saying, yeah, you can do something. You can, just take a look what we can do. And slowly but steady, it creates emotions, sometimes not even slowly. It creates negative emotions, like which lead to something like fear or anxiety, where you are afraid of something which is actually not real at all, but you are still afraid of it. And if you have it absolutely not under control, it basically costs you sleep. Some people get angry in front of others, or let's say bad mood, these kind of things. And if these things stack, so you have multiple of those things, unfinished thoughts, unfinished threats in your head, unfinished emotions of the last days, even months or years, that add up to something where you simply burn out on some point in time. So there is this term, or there's this exhaustion, what we know out there, which we call burnout, which is just you have done a lot and you are exhausted and you feel burned out, but this is not the one. The burnout I'm talking about is when you mentally start to burn out because you can actually not manage the things anymore happening in your head. If you are a leader, if you are a family person, if you are an entrepreneur, if you are a solopreneur, a coach out there listening to that, if you are a creator, whatever you are, right? So if a leadership person as an employee is the very same thing. Just had today's sessions again, and spoke to people who were employed and extremely ownership driven, and people have these issues. People have then, let's say, issues because of challenges, and the challenges overwhelm people. because part of the human condition, and I'm very, very close to the human condition. Everything I do, everything we're talking about is always about the human condition. That is the common denominator we all have. That is not the very same, but is very similar in every one of us. And you can see and you can spot those patterns after a while. And it is something you need to learn just for yourself. You need to always start with yourself, because in the human condition, you will see what is actually necessary to improve yourself, to be able to intervene, to be able to see things coming, like those emotions, like the negative things, and give it a name and start to work with that. You need basically stay in control, stay in agency. And I go through a number of methods, 6 or 7 methods, which I recommend to you. Maybe not the very last, but we'll talk about the last one, but this is already a very advanced, actually the last 2 ones are pretty advanced. There is an 8th one. I don't talk about that. That's definitely only, and I don't recommend to use it if you not have an identity yet. Identity is a very important aspect. Um, Identity is a dangerous aspect, because people can give you an identity. You can give yourself an identity. As long as you are intentional about that, all is good. As long as you are reflective and doing some form of journaling or something like that, and you know about yourself, is fine as well. But everything regarding identity, mindset coaches out there helping you to shape identities, make sure it is not an external identity. That is one of the most dangerous things, right? You can do to yourself, because as soon as you work on these things, you create habits, and those habits lead to something you don't get rid of easily anymore. So whatever you do, every method we're talking about today is basically something you need to do just with yourself. There's no external help necessary. And what I always say is, do that with yourself, before you go to someone else. You can use a mentor, you can use a coach, but always start trying it for yourself. Never be in the external dependency of someone else, or have that as a dependency, because if you are bound to a person, you always and only do that with that person. But you need to learn to do that just by yourself. And those methods are basically all usable by yourself. Most of them, if not all of them, are more than 2,000 years old. Basically, probably older than that, but the Stoics, well, many philosophers were talking about that, and many leadership people, many people today, millions of people today actually practice that still today. And it is, it's Stoic methods. It must not only be Stoic. So there are, philosophies around there which are similar, but I'm a Stoic, so I'm talking in the Stoic lens, and I think that's the most easiest to look up the things we will talk about today. So let me quickly take a look. The stream should be up right now. Good. Let me quick. So hello Substack, hello LinkedIn. So first topic for today will be the title, Stop Suffering Twice, as already explained. It's about that we learn to take back control in the moment when we need to have the control. So why we suffer twice? So what I mean by suffering twice is pretty easy. So you have that emotional reaction, you suffer by that, but you take control, you move on, you are going forward, everything is fine. That's the ideal way. So you have suffered once, but not twice. Twice or more times, it is basically when we're talking about that you don't get rid of these kind of things, and you do it over and over and over again. When you do that, so when an emotion, a circumstance, an external person is doing that to you, you have no control over yourself. Another person or another thing, another circumstance does have that instead. And you need to change something about that. So that can be basically a mistake. Let me quickly, it's a little bit off screen, sorry. Just saw that. So it's a mistake. You have mistakenly behaved yourself in a situation, and you regret that a little bit, and you don't know how the people will react, and you over and over thinking that through, and you try to find a solution in your brain. You don't. It's done. cope with it, write it down, and wait for what will happen. That's as easy as it is, because you cannot do something. Either you go to these persons right now and ask them to have a call and have a conversation about that, be honest about what's bothering you, and you will see most people won't be mad at you at all, and just go for that. But don't make this a suffering in every hour into the night until the time comes and you suddenly realize that it wasn't that bad of an issue actually. And it is, the fear of these kind of things is what actually makes it a problem. A missed opportunity, a business fear, family conflict. You need to tackle those things. You need to act. But in order to act, and that is now a little bit of real talk, you cannot simply say, just act, right? So people give you the advice, yeah, just do that, as I said right now. You need to do that. But if you aren't prepared for that, you are so full of anxiety, so fully driven by your ego, your subconscious mind, that acting become more and more complicated. The obstacle becomes higher and higher, the ego stronger, resistance to change huge, and you become basically, you cannot move anymore. That is one of the issues. And let's get into the first method. Um, I prepared that for desktop, so that is one of the things I need to a little bit cope with it, because streaming right now to the mobile version. But by the way, if you don't have time for that one, there will be a recording on my Substack in YouTube. Not a recording, but a long form cutted video version where I cut out these kind of things which are not that important. But yeah, so starting with method one, the dichotomy of control. You might have heard already if you are in the Stoic area or philosophical area, or you might use it yourself. But the dichotomy is actually a little bit of a binary thing. You have the control, you have not the control. Now we have three things here, because I like the three circles method to describe the control, no control, and what is actually in between. So the control is everything you can control, right? Which is basically only yourself, your actions and your reactions. That is what you might have heard of Stoic, which means that you, in the moment when something hits you, you can only, because that is a form of reaction right now. So, how do you react in that moment? You see that emotion coming and you say, well, I see the emotion, I stay calm. That is an intentional action reaction cycle you do in that moment. That is helpful. You are in charge. But if that emotion comes, someone is triggering you, and you fight immediately back. You try to harm that person. You do what your primal instincts tell you, your ego basically. That is reaction based on externals. You are not in charge. You will regret it. You will regret it. No matter if you lie to other people that you were strong, and no, you will regret it, because you regret that you were not able to stay in charge over yourself. Be you are not able to stay in control. That is the point about that. So then we have the no control. This is where we simply don't. So if someone else does something to you, does something in your company, tells you a message you don't want to hear, or is doing something which annoys you, that is like that. You have no control over that. Stop wasting time thinking more than once about this. If you have processed it, you need to find a way to say, I'm not wasting time anymore into that. We're going into that a little bit further. But you need to understand this. So the idea is that you have the influence in between, so you can influence things. Like if you are part of a team, if you are a leadership person and you have followers, people you're supposed to lead, you can have influence of these people or on these people. It's no problem. You can have that, but you can't control them. This is the reason why bosses, or the people who actually try to micromanage every person in the proximity, that is not working because of that, because you can only control your intention, your action, your reaction, but you cannot control the actions and reactions of other people. You can influence them in a positive way, you can influence them in a negative way, but this is what you can do. No control, control. And you need to learn the difference. You might have heard of the serenity prayer. This is what, for example, the Alcoholics Anonymous are actually doing. It is understand what you can control and understand what you cannot control and learn the difference. That is based on a Stoic principle. it is basically the understanding part is that important. The dichotomy of control is about understanding the differences. If you don't understand them, you don't act intentionally. So that is one of the methods you can actually try. How? Just ask yourself in a moment when something triggers you. You need to learn there's a trigger, and then take a look how you act and how you react. Are you in control? Are you not in control? Can you 100% say yes or no to something and it happens, then you are in control. If not, then you are not in control. Simple as that. And if you do that basically every day with most things you do, you just with that method, that's one of the core methods of Stoicism, you actually get to the point of being in self-control already. That's not a big problem there. So in meanwhile, hello Mohammed, hello Venikta, hello Paramita, hello Manan, hello people on YouTube and others. Let's go to the sorry, I forgot to show those. Those are the circles visualized of another session I had live. Is the control, the influence, control and influence are somehow interconnected, and there's a no control. Don't put energy into the basically the no control zone. That's very important. Let's get to the second one. I need to zoom again. Again, it was prepared for desktop, so sorry for that. Name the ego. So that is what I personally really like. It's definitely influenced by Stephen Pressfield, my favorite book author, actually. And you need to give something you want to change a name. So, or you want to take control over in your own mind. If you don't give it a name, if you don't make it an entity, you won't see it coming. You won't see the patterns of it. This is how humans actually work. You need to give it a shape in order to recognize it when it happens. So the ego is something buried below ourselves. So it is not us. And that is important. The muse as well, but I'm not talking too much about the muse today. So the muse is the positive driving forward force we have as well. It's as well not us. And we don't need to brag about it. It's not us. Us, we, the self, what is in Western world called the self, or basically is a very old concept, is the part of reasoning. So of the consciousness and the reasoning. That is how I basically understand it and feel it, and I think is probably most of for every one of you. But ego is not. Ego is a driving force which I guess was implemented in our brains to actually make us survive in very harsh environments. Saving energy, avoiding obstacles can lead to death, these kind of things. But this exact same ego, this exact same force works in a modern society with so many challenges and obstacles at the same time, so many intentions and impressions absolutely against us. And it will lead to an absolute overload of emotions which we cannot handle, which makes it mandatory to get in one way or another into control again. So give it a name. And when you see like the typical patterns, I don't want to do this. You are in front of a challenge. You need to apply somewhere. You need to change jobs. You want to do something for your career. Yeah. This is not the right time. I need to think more. Preparation. Preparation is very often procrastination. I'm just like this. I don't need to change. This will not work anyway. Or the very best thing, when others tell to you, you don't need to change. You are great like you are. That's one of the worst advices you can give to someone, because it feels good in that moment, but it's actually the other ego is trying to keep you from not changing so that everyone can just, agree on not changing. But if you need to change, you will regret that on some point. So do something about that. Maybe those things are true. It is possible that ego is not always like lying, but it is a strong indicator that something is off. So you need to become aware of it in order to reflect about that. Very important. But maybe it's resistance. Resistance basically is the other word for ego. Stephen Pressfield framed that is the capital R, resistance. So make it entity. The ego's name is resistance, because he framed it as the root fear of all. So it is basically the resistance to change, the fear of change is the root cause for the worst thing on this planet. And in my opinion, he's right. If you take a look long enough into the human condition, you understand that this kind of avoidance leads to so many unused opportunities, which on a long enough timeline even leads to suffering of other people. Because we are social animals, humans are social animals. We have reasoning. We need to use it in order to contribute back to the social society. We cannot just sit there and don't do this all day long. And this is a famous quote of Marcus Aurelius as well, where he was basically going about the bees and all the animals going about their duties, and he lying in bed and thinking about, can I postpone that? That was the ego, the resistance. But he was reflecting that, giving it a name and writing it down so he could basically steer the subconscious mind to actually do it anyway. And this is how we do that. That resistance you won't destroy it. It will be always there, and will be always like giving you reason to reconsider doing things which you actually should do. So what remains unnamed remains invisible. What remains visible controls you. Invisible, so of course, invisible. So what that means is you cannot control essentially what you cannot see. So if you give it a name, you can make it visible. You can, but what, again, as I said at the beginning, the important part is the pattern behind that. Because realizing that you have an ego is one thing. Understanding when the ego hits, when the subconscious mind hits and try to get you away from the actual obstacle you need to take, then you need to you need to realize that this pattern is against you. Probably is against you, but you need to be critical and you need to reason about that. You need to use the ability, whatever has created you, has given to you, to be a better version than just the version who would react to that based on primal instincts. So if you feel anxiety, you don't do that. The path of least resistance is not the path you need to go. The obstacle is the way. A famous quote of Ryan Holiday's, basically his book, it's the Stoic principle, and it's absolutely true. In order to change something for the better, especially for the society around you, we're talking about the silver virtues here, not the bronze virtues, right? So you want to do something for others as well. You want to, you think, so it's about Stoic leadership here. So we're talking about the silver virtues, of course. And for those, you need to take obstacles. You cannot just run away and expect things to change. These kind of things don't work. So give the things you need to overcome, and the things try to keep you away from this, give those things names and try to learn the patterns, recognize them, and become aware when they hit you. Let's go to the next method. The method 3 is, by the way, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm always open to questions. Method 3 is the commitment and reflection cycle. That is basically what I teach with the mirror book journaling. Journaling is a very important method to understand who you are, what you have committed yourself to, how your practice went today. So everything with the pattern recognition, the dichotomy of control we were talking about, this is part of the practice cycle. This is not necessarily part of the commitment and the reflection cycle. Yes, but mainly from the practice. But on some point in time, you need to think about, what have I done today and what do I need to improve tomorrow? And you shouldn't be, it's the same thing like the idea of this show, the name of this show, which or of this episode is that you shouldn't suffer twice. Then don't do it, right? If you have done something wrong today, just go and don't suffer twice. Make sure you have understood what you have made wrong, take the essence out of it, and then go make it better next day. But don't suffer about that. Tomorrow you have the next chance to do it better. Then do it. That's all nature wants from you, and actually the society around you as well. If society around you see that you are actually improving, then you won't have the big issue with that you need to feel this regret. This is more for you. This is an internal feeling, right? So let's get quickly over those points, which is the commit phase, what kind of person do I intend to be today? This is the commitment phase in the morning. You basically write down who you want to be, who you don't want to be. I personally write down the voluntary discomfort as well. There's a method later on. I just explain it. I write down my personal activities I want to do, and I prime myself if I know that there is something coming up, you know, premeditatio malorum, for example. There is something coming up, and I know it. I am somehow afraid of it, but I am tackling that ideas already. That in the moment when it comes, my mind is already prepared. This is all what I do in the morning, basically. Then I practice, right? I just do. I don't really reflect or do philosophy all day long. I do my business. I'm a father. I'm a business person. I have challenges. I have obstacles. I have a lot of things which really stresses me, right? Long days, these kind of things. And then in the evening, I go sit down and reflect. This is what I do with my mirror book. I have a lot of here. I have a lot of spare books with me, but I always have one with me and I write things down. It is not like I don't intend to write a book which is published. It is just for me and no one is supposed to read it. The point is that reflection phase is where I need to be very honest with myself. It is the point where I don't lie to myself. I don't go and say or write things down which are not true. And I don't bloom them and I don't make them looking nice. Because as soon as you write something for someone else, you try to look good. You do that based on your ego, because of your emotions, because that's part of human condition. But if it's just you and you can make it clear to you, it's just for you, it's just it's a secret, it's just for you, then you can be, and only then you can be 100% certain that or you have a chance that you can be actually honest to yourself. And this honesty needs to get into understanding, so become understanding about the issues, and then acceptance. Once you have accepted it, you can basically correct and adapt. So basically the adaptation phase. So, commit, practice, reflect, adapt, or correct, how you want to phrase it. But that is the loop. You basically do every day from now on. That is, in my opinion, the most important method of all of those, because all of the others are important as well. But if you have not this overview, you don't really know where you need to go and when you actually need to intervene, and you don't learn the patterns I was talking about. Because this is, especially the reflection phase, is where you learn those patterns best, because you learn about yourself a lot there. So let's take a look at the next one, which is the signals and the not doing. You might have heard of the signal to noise ratio, famously introduced by Steve Jobs, and maybe other entrepreneurial giants. It is not directly about that. So there's not a ratio here. What I mean by signal is you have your potential. So the potential is what you can achieve, which is not yet. So it's not yet reality, but you can make it reality. A small example to give you a little bit of a understanding of what potential is and what is not. The things you have imagined yourself to become as a child are your potential. Why? Because you don't imagine to become Superman. You imagine to become a firefighter, a pilot, astronaut, owning a hotel, whatever you want to think of. Maybe your parents did or something like that. Because your subconscious mind, your pattern recognition machine, is forming a path for you towards this, which is basically the muse. The muse is forming a path, so it becomes your potential. You are naive enough as a child to see that, but the older you get, the less naive you are, most of us actually. So it becomes harder and harder to actually see this potential. Those signals are either pointing towards that potential or pointing away from that. So I call it the green signals, which are pointing towards the potential, and the red signals, which can be, most of them are ego. Some of them are the muse, like the shiny object syndrome, pointing towards a great potential next to your potential, which is actually not the potential you should follow, but you should stick with when. With many people don't have that. Some people have that. For me, like a little bit neurodivergent. So I love to have multiple potentials at the same time, which is not a good idea because you cannot focus on something. But that is not really like the control thing. Okay, it is, because you need to stay in control over deciding what you actually want to do. You can't do everything at the same time. So stay in intentional control, in intention over what you want to do. So you need to learn the signals, the green signals and the red signals. To actually understand it a little bit better and integrate that into your journaling, I have taught that to many mentees so far, which is it's kind of hard to get that on screen. So my signal is you write it down in the morning. It's done when I will not waste energy on and my first action. So you become actionable and basically do that. I know that several mentees have added things. I personally write down a signal just by a little phrase or a sentence or a word. This is what I basically do for myself because it's enough if you do that over time. But when you start, it makes sense to write that down because it's not a to do. That's the difference. You might think, this is a to do. No, it's not a to do list. Signals are much more abstract than to dos are. The first action could be a to do, but the signal itself is more like I'm working on a software solution right now for coaches. That's what I'm doing for business next to mentoring others. And I need to focus myself in the morning. And very often, specific signals are specific parts I need to focus on today to get to the eventual potential to get that done, right? So I can't do 10 tickets or 10 to dos today. I need to focus on a specific area. And this specific area is my signal, for example, right? If I want to lose weight or I need to get fit, I need to have a signal that I do something significant in cardio today, for example. That could be a signal, but not a to do like my workout plan, or I need to go to the gym or go for a run at 3 p.m. or something like that. No, it's not that. It is a signal that you need to do this. And then you need to think about that signal and keep that in mind. That is what you take with you, just as a reminder, as a preparation for the day, that this is what you need to do today. Why? Because if someone else gets to you, especially you do that before the office, you hit the office, 3 phone calls, other people tell you what you need to do, right? And then you need to remember, I have committed myself to do that. So you have a chance to steer in that moment intentionally towards something and not become the victim of externals who dictate what you need to do, just to get again into the anxiety we were talking about in the beginning, because so many things are basically then dictated by someone else outside of your control. And if you can take control over yourself and say maybe no, because you have other signals and you have the authority to do so, then do it. Don't be afraid because you have prepared for that. You have good reason to stay with your signals. Because if you don't have a reason to stay with your signals, those are not your signals. Simply, if you want to change, you need to stand with your signals. You need to stand your ground. That's your obstacle. You need to take it. And if it's not today, you need to definitely do it tomorrow, not in a week or something like that. So you need to make sure you don't lose it, right? That is the only thing you might regret in the future is that you have never followed the signals. Stoics were phrasing that a little different back then, and it is the same thing. It's like you the only way you can regret things is if you never become that person you could have been. That is basically the very same thing, and that is what we need to understand here in this moment. Okay. Method 5, the voluntary discomfort. Now I have it on screen. The voluntary discomfort is a quite simple method which you can integrate into your journaling. If you don't journal, you can just do it freely. You pick one little thing, a different thing, important, a different thing each day. It shouldn't become a habit because then you just unlearn things. That's not the idea of that. It must hurt you every day a little bit in a way that your nervous system understands, oh, something happened, but you were already prepared. So you had this effect today already. Why is that important? Because overnight, your mind resets to some degree. It's some form of homeostasis. The first thing comes up in the morning is resistance again. You need to wake up yourself. You need to get back into the day. And that's the reason why so many self-help advice is to make your bed in the morning. Those kind of things manifest or signal your day, your subconscious mind, your nervous system, what you want to do, what you need to do. And basically, the voluntary discomfort is the very same thing, just that you give already a training for your nervous system for a voluntary thing. I love to drink coffee. I basically drink coffee every day. That's my thing. I think I'm not the only one here, right? And sometimes I sit there and just say, okay, no coffee today. And then I sit there and I could order a coffee, and I don't do that. I order a water, just a water. Simple thing. Just do it. It will help you. If a thing is for you that you hate to run in the morning, then force yourself to wake up earlier and run in the morning today, even though you would do it in sunshine at noon or something like that. Something which annoys you to some degree that you need to do that right now. But you do that nonetheless. It doesn't really hurt you and you can go on with your day. And if something real happens like this, you are already primed for exactly that or similar situations. That is what you prepare your mind. So you don't have this typical like, wow, that's something you you know where you need to have a lot of extra power to actually make that intervention in that moment, which would be based on the dichotomy of control and reasoning, which we were discussing beforehand. The less reason you give to actually put a lot of power into keeping your control, the better it is, right? So that's a good form of preparation. Easy to do. Now let's get to the premeditatio malorum, which is basically widely discussed right now. It was widely discussed 2000 years ago. It is in fact used by the Stoics, but it is not necessarily Stoic. It is a philosophy practice, basically. So, and it is not the most easiest thing to do. It can quickly drift away into negative manifestation, but what we do here is actually negative visualization, because negative manifestation can be a very powerful tool for a person 100% in self-control, self-awareness, and reflection. But I don't even want to talk about this. This was the last method I wanted to actually, where I said I put it out because I don't think we should discuss it at all, because it can harm people if it's used wrongly. But this method here, is basically the visualization version, which actually works quite well. Because let's get through this example. I know this from myself. When many things come together, business pressure, family responsibilities, content, clients, uncertainty, my mind wants to run in 10 directions. And then I have to remind myself I cannot solve my whole life in one thought. I can only return to the next right action. If I do that, for example, during journaling again, which is a great platform to do that. Now I'm sitting down and I have my day. I know in which context I am. So I'm always reflecting about the current circumstances I am in. Maybe I have a meeting today I'm afraid of. And I write down a negative version. I write down that I could drift away. This is the example. I drift away. Or if something goes wrong, I visualize that it can go wrong. It's okay. It can go wrong, because if it then happens, it is not really harmful to me, because my subconscious mind already knew the pattern. It can go wrong. It's not like a sudden, very bad reaction. You need to intervene again. You need to understand the pattern. You need to have the power to intervene. You need to be in the mood to intervene and not be exhausted already like hell because it's already late in the night and you have not have any sleep. Maybe you are ill, you are sick, something like that. The more you prepare yourself, the less power you need to put into self-control in the moment when that happens. So that is an easier term I personally like to use, is priming yourself. You prime yourself for the day in the morning. It's much easier to understand than actually premeditatio malorum, which actually means to premeditate the negative things in malorum in the morning. But it's still powerful. But this, I would say, it's more advanced. This is the reason why it is more in the lower section. You shouldn't start with that, in my opinion. You should start with understanding the dichotomy of control, what you can control, what not, and what you can influence. You should start to journal. With those two things, and naming ego, that's good as well. Naming ego. With those three things, when you start with that one, you will, after 2 weeks already, see a huge difference. I get so many messages from mentees using the journaling technique and saying that, I wanted to talk about that today. I had this situation, I was quitted, my freelancer was quitted. Now I'm getting the next freelancing. That was an example recently. And I was so afraid. And then I realized, no, I don't need to be afraid. It's like an old habit, an old pattern re-emerged. Suddenly that person was so afraid that this person was even quitting several contracts to save money, several subscriptions, and then reverted that and said, what I'm doing here right now, all is fine. And the funny thing was, next day, there was already the next contract he was basically going into. And all the negative aspects were absolutely wrong and did not help at all. And he thought in the very early, so basically right after that, he thought like, yeah, you know, I, I think that emotions were good. And then after a while thinking, no, actually not, because he replaced in that moment the idea that the reflection, the emotion was actually driving you forward to that success, which was not. It was reasoning, which came late. So what actually lacked was the ability to apply reason in the very beginning of that issue, which means that there was not enough practice in that loop I was talking about. You need to have this reflection loop where journaling actually helps. That's important to understand. If you do that, you can actually get to the point where you can become the person you want to be, your potential, because you understand in a moment where things hit you that you need to do something about that, that you have the control over the situation. And if you feel you don't have the control over the situation, you might lose your temper, you might lose it, you have disturbing thoughts, whatever happens. Sometimes it happens to me as well. Then you need to realize that, start to think, get back into control, intervene the next emotion coming up and say, no, that's enough emotion for now. I get back into control. That is what people think the indifference of Stoics is about, that they are cold. It's not cold. It's exactly that. It is, you feel those emotions much clearer than others, in my opinion, because what you actually do is you sense them, you spot them, you learn them in that moment to understand, you accept them, that they are part of your entirety but not of yourself, and yourself is deciding to not just go with them, to not act based upon them. And that is the power. For an external person, looks like a fortress of indifference, to fortify yourself. It is true, but it is only there to just protect yourself, to make the right calls, the right decisions in that moment. And I realized that as I practiced that more and more in my life, I became a better father as well. It's now just a private topic, but I was in the very beginning of my fatherhood. It was so much for me, so life changing. I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't. I was a leadership person. I was a business person. I thought I knew what stress is, and then suddenly I had all I had before plus children. Yay! And I think in the first years, I wasn't the very best father to my kids because I wasn't able to actually understand what I'm doing there. That I was thinking I am right because I was actually just giving in to my emotion, which was absolutely wrong in that moment. And I haven't realized it. Slowly but steady, I was thinking about that, reflecting about that together with my wife as well. I was journaling and got into the conclusion that it's actually me. It all starts with me. That's the reason why I always say it all starts with me. And when I help a mentee, a team, it all starts with you. It is always the same. This is a fundamental rule of the human condition. We cause most of the problems ourselves, especially when we are not aware of that. The more aware we are, the more intentional we are, the more in control we are, the less problems we create, the more solutions we create. Hence, we can influence others to the positive, to the better, which is, in the dichotomy of control, I had this influence in the middle. That's the part where you don't have control over, but you can influence. That is not a waste of energy, even though you don't have it in control. And that is so important to understand. Do you want to be a better person? then you need to understand the patterns. You need to understand yourself and how you act and react in specific situations, especially when you take a look into the day which you have just practiced today. Were you living up to your commitments? Have you done everything right? Have you yelled at a person where it wasn't adequate to do, which is most often the case? But why have you done this? Why have you lost control? What can you do better next time to remember the pattern earlier, to have more time to intervene, when at some point in time you will not even be triggered anymore by this? Even though the triggering is, let's be honest, triggering probably will always happen, but the triggering process shall already trigger the intervention and not the uncontrolled reaction. That is what should happen. So I think I should stop talking now. There was another example, but I think we are through now with the essentials I wanted to talk about today. So I hope that was helpful for you. I see 8 people on Substack. I see several on LinkedIn and YouTube. Hello, everyone. That will be a video as well, because it's an end of week reflection. I know that many of you are not there anymore and already wrote me that you want to have that as a recording. You will get that. And I think that it is very important, we as human beings, to think about what we can change in our lives, to make our lives better, to make the lives for the people we live with better, for our family, for our colleagues, for the people we're responsible for. And the very best thing is to change ourselves, because here we can make 100% change. Yes, we can change to 100% to the better. Not overnight. It takes a lot of time, it takes discipline, and it takes the awareness and the willingness to change. It takes the ability to look into the mirror and say, I don't like what I see. I want to change it. And that leads me to let's say last example is the famous quote from Epictetus, who said in Discourses that you can't learn what you think you already can or already know. That was in a discourse about, or in a context of helping someone to learn better. It's basically the pupils he taught in the Stoic school he had, the school of him. And that is what we need to understand. If we think that we know already everything, we have a problem to see what we have done wrong. If we don't see what we have done wrong, we won't see reason to change something. And reason to change something should be based on the reasoning of ours. So we should reason about that and say, yes, and based on the judgment as well, we have done wrong, and for the reason, or we actually need to do differently. So do differently. Just reason about what you need to change tomorrow, how you better memorize patterns, how you intervene better, and how to simply become a better person and improve and not suffer again from the very same things over and over again and waste time. Instead, put the time into the future and become better in what you do. I hope that helped a little bit. I thank you for listening. And I wish you a great weekend. Reflect about what you have done this week. Don't go into the weekend, just do nothing. Think about that. Take this episode today as something you can take with you, and as something which, or the reflection, which help you to understand what to do next week better, what your general signals are, and what you want to do on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday to actually improve. Because it all starts with you, and it all starts today, not tomorrow. If you want to change something on Monday, it's best to start today with that. Then go into tomorrow, and then on Sunday, you get into Monday when you already have prepared for that. Much easier to remember on Monday that you wanted to change something, which is very unlikely that you do. So start today. I wish you a great day. See you, everyone. See you next time. Goodbye.